To start off, you will see the 6-foot human positioned in what's called prone. You will notice weight bearing taking place on the cheek. From prone, we go to prone on elbows. Right here, we see some head lifting, and this is where the weight shifting really develops in the infant. From prone on elbows, we go to prone on extended arms. It's important to note that tricep activation is taking place. From there, you see the 6-foot human attempt to perform pivot prone. Not as good as an infant, but at least we tried. And then you will notice that the weight shift goes up and back into quadruped. From quadruped, we will move into what's called locomotion. So we're going to be crawling up and back and forth. Hey, Dr. Trammell, I figured we could do something a little differently. We can pretend like you're the student or like the parent of a future patient I might have, and I'm the PT or like the professor. So basically, I'm just going to teach you about prone progression, and then a little later on teach you about rolling progression. I figured this would challenge my people skills, and not only that, like it'll help me understand the progressions even more because I will actually be teaching it. So let's start off with prone progression, and you'll hear in my video I touched on it a little bit. So with prone progression, this is where the infant has weight bearing on the cheek, and you'll initially see the survival instinct of ATNR. From prone, you see the infant go to prone on elbows, and here I mentioned head lifting, and then you see stabilization of the pelvis, and this is really where the weight shifting develops, and you have kind of that proprioceptive feedback and just that equilibrium starting to build up and formulate. I think it's also important to note that this is where reaching begins, and it's also where you start to develop that elongation during the weight bearing. So from prone on elbows, we go to prone on extended arms, and you can kind of guess that it's gonna have the tricep activation. Besides that, you're also gonna have anterior thoracic muscle elongation and posterior pelvic tilt with weight bearing on the pelvis. So from there, we go to what's pivot prone. And at pivot prone, you see this around 5 months, and it's kind of how it sounds. The kiddo is kind of pivoting and prone. So the pelvis has an anterior tilt. The infant is going to have a high guard, so the arms are up. And with that comes activation of scapular retraction. And also you're going to have your lower extremities and your legs extended with the hips. So from pivot prone, we have our weight shifting up and back into quadruped. So they're on all fours, and with this, you initially start out with a wider base of support, and as they start to progress and get stronger, that base of support decreases and they're able to weight shift. And this all comes in anticipation of crawling. From quadruped, we have locomotion, so you can guess it's gonna be crawling. Some other examples of locomotion can include scooting, crawl, like an army crawl, belly on the floor. And then we already touched on pivot prone. And then we also have rolling. Now, just to kind of tie some of these same things in together, the milestones for prone progression, 1 to 2 months, we begin to lift our head in midline. And then 3 to 5 months, we have that prone on elbows. And then at 5 months, you have weight shifts to bear on one arm to reach with the other arm. At 4 to 6 months, you have that prone on extended elbows. And then 7 to 9 months, the quadruped takes place once you place the infant. And then 9 to 11 months, you have creeping. So that basically just means the trunk's off the ground. You have activation of lower extremities and contralateral trunk rotation. So with rolling, we start off in what's called non-segmental position of rolling. With this one, it's pretty straightforward. You have log rolling taking place. So the cute little infant is just being a cute little log roller. Now this one is based on the neck riding reaction. And what I found most interesting about this position is that there's no vertebral column rotation or like no involvement. I found that to be interesting. From non-segmental, we go on to segmental. Now with this one, remember I mentioned neck riding reaction. This starts to diminish, and instead we have the body riding reaction start to develop. So I kind of do that riding with my body as I read about it. I think it's important to note with this position, there is a red flag, and that's the inability to roll in both directions. With segmental rolling, you initially start to see it at 5 to 6 months. It's accidental, and then it starts to become volitional. Now, just to tie it back in together, the non-segmental rolling, that's going to take place around 3 months, and that goes from a supine to side lying position. And then that volitional rolling that I mentioned, it starts at 5 months, and you go from prone to supine, and then you progress and you go supine to prone, and that takes place at 6 months. And that's what we have on rolling.